director of the Partners in Progress organization. And like I said, this is a sad day for the Village of Pinehurst staff, I guess if you want to call it that, all of us. But we're excited for what Natalie can do for our community in the future in that role. So I think this is just one of those bittersweet moments. And we'll pick up the pieces and we're going to move on. But I think in the long run, we're all going to be better for it. So I'm all in favor of this. The second is that it may not be clear yet to everybody, but we are in the process of doing a master plan for West Pinehurst Park. And I don't think we've gotten this out through our public notices channels yet, but you'll see it very soon. We're planning 2 public input meetings. They're going to be virtual. They're both going to be held on the 4th of May. The first one will be from 10 to 11, and the second one will be 6:30 to 7:30 in the evening. And you'll see that in press releases, and also the information will be available soon on our main webpage to facilitate folks' opportunity to get involved in that. We want to hear what folks have to say about what they need in terms of amenities out there at that park. So very important opportunity. That's all I've got, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Several comments from me with respect to organizations that I liaise with or in general have contact with. First of all, I want to indicate to the council and staff, over the last week I wrote a letter to the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. We have not been able to meet, of course, for several months. Hopefully, I indicated to them we'll start to meet again in May if conditions are right. And I encourage them to, if they have issues or comments or things they want to discuss, to communicate back to me directly, or more easily, probably, to my VOP, to encourage them and residents of their neighborhoods to use my VOP to identify issues and questions to village government. We've certainly found that to be a wonderful source of information and tracking for village government. So hopefully we'll get back with the NAC over the next couple of months, and council members as well will have the opportunity to hear from that very helpful group. Another thing I'd like to react to in very brief comment is the newspaper story about a casino in Pinehurst. I've had quite a bit of feedback, I'm sure council members have too, from residents of the community. I would just say to the community at large that the Village of Pinehurst was not contacted in any way, as far as I know, with respect to that study by the State Education Lottery. The consultant came up with a few locations. Evidently, Pinehurst was one, that casino gambling might be allowed or beneficial to their point of view in Pinehurst. But we knew nothing about that, and the residential community here, as I have heard from it recently, is very much against that activity, and that would be my personal feeling as well. But there has been quite a bit of feedback on that, and I just wanted to clarify that it's nothing that the village at this point had any involvement in. I also want to mention, and Judy, maybe you would like to comment too, on a meeting of the Moore County Board of Commissioners about a week ago, which was a presentation by a consultant for the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and it has to do with the occupancy tax. A task force will be set up. There were a number of ideas exchanged at that meeting, but a task force will be set up to carry that idea a bit more forward. Finally, there's been another, because we've had them in the past, another nice story, this time in Sandhills Magazine, just out in the April issue, about the Village of Pinehurst and our history. I was contacted by the writer of the story to make some general comments about it, but it's a very lengthy story about the village's history and its current situation, and it's a good quick read and a good distribution piece if you have people that are interested in Pinehurst or want to know a bit more about our history. A nice magazine article on that in Sandhills Magazine. That concludes my comments, and I would then defer to Judy Davis, Mayor Pro Tem. Do you have some comments this evening?
Thank you, John. I'll just follow up on your comment about the meeting with the county commissioners. It was really looking at what's happening around the state with regard to occupancy tax. And there's been some interest in increasing the occupancy tax here in Moore County to raise it from 3% to 6%. And also looking at what might happen with the proceeds of that incremental occupancy tax. No decisions were made at that meeting. I think the pilot really covered it well, but by and large, most people that spoke at the meeting were in favor of the occupancy tax increase, except for one person from Whispering Pines. But I think that'll be a future subject of the county commissioners meeting going forward. Second, I'd like to say that spring has sprung, and tomorrow the Pinehurst Farmers Market will open, and on Wednesday it's the Seafood Lady. So if you're interested in having seafood that's come fresh off a boat in Beaufort or some other wonderful place on the coast of North Carolina, it's a good place to pick it up, and they'll be opening tomorrow 3 to 6 and on Saturdays 10 to about noon. Also, I'd like to echo Jeff's comments about the imminent departure of Natalie Hawkins, whose legacy in the village of Pinehurst is just unparalleled, and the knowledge that she has about Pinehurst will probably be leveraged highly, I hope, for the betterment of all of Moore County. I think we're really, sad, very sad to see her go, but I think that she can really contribute to Moore County in a much more dramatic and impactful way. So we look forward to your new role, Natalie, and certainly wish you the very best.
Judy, thank you very much. I'll move over to Lydia Bosch.
Thanks, John. Couple of things from the Beautification Committee. Arbor Day is April the 22nd, and they found a pretty cool way to commemorate it. Let's see, Karen Kaplan from the Greenway Wildlife Habitat Committee is working on a film that features our longleaf pine ecosystem, and it will be shown to all of the children at Pinehurst Elementary, and then all the kids will be given a pine seedling, a longleaf pine seedling to take home to plant. So that's pretty cool, and that will be on April the 30th. And the second thing, on May the 4th, all of the pretty seasonal flowers will be planted in the core village. And the Beautification Committee is looking for help on that. So if anybody wants to help them, head on down on May the 4th, go to the center of the village at 8:30 in the morning, take your gloves, your trowel, anything you need to kneel upon, anything you need to plant, take it with you. And Jeff, if this is appropriate for us to put in our social media or whatever, the Beautification Committee would like all the help they could get. May 4th, 8:30. Come on down. Oh, and also I don't want to take any more time, but ditto what John and Judy said about Natalie. Natalie is irreplaceable, but I'm excited about this opportunity for her. That's it. Thanks.
Jane Hogeman.
Thanks, John. I just want to report in on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. They're planning their bike rodeo on April 22nd at the community center. And they also are ready to go on putting in sidewalks from Rattlesnake to Woods Road, which is great. That's the project from last January 2020, when people appeared from that area, appeared before the council, and we're looking for sidewalks there. And it's great that project is moving forward. They've also got crossing signals in on Highway 5, which is tremendous. And they have some projects proposed for the next fiscal year for some sidewalks on the west side of Lake Pinehurst. We also had a number of residents, about a dozen or so, come to the meeting and provide some very helpful comments about their concerns and feelings with respect to sidewalks in a different neighborhood altogether, one which actually was not on our radar screen, but that's enormously helpful to have. We welcome, of course, all those kinds of comments, information, and input, and that will be helpful to us going forward in future years.
Jane, thanks very much.
And also, if I could just say, Natalie, thank you for everything. And we're all still friends here, and Anytime. Wishing you well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Jane.
Kevin Drum, and Kevin and I spoke earlier about an important meeting last week of Partners in Progress, and I think he wants to report on that
Right.
now. Very helpful. Go ahead,
I wonder,
Kevin.
I wonder if I should have Natalie do it on Partners in Progress. But I want to congratulate Natalie, and I see no one better to help in economic development in this county, and you're going to be missed. They did a presentation. I'm very familiar with the goals of Partners in Progress, from entrepreneurship, because I'm an entrepreneur, to golf, because I've been in the golf business, but I was very unsure about the medical sciences side. And they had a medical sciences presentation that was, it's hard to make it really interesting, but what made it really interesting is that life sciences and clinical trials aren't a pipe dream for Pinehurst. They're happening already. I know Dr. Pritchard, Michael Pritchard, is on the forefront of a pulmonary specialist, specializing in the lungs. And he's been involved with the first trial in the nation. I'm saying that right. First Health was involved with the first trial in the nation on a new robotics clinical study. And if you look at the other participating hospitals in this clinical trial, it reads like a who's who. Massachusetts General Hospital, Beth Israel, and the Mayo Clinic are a few that participated, but we were first. And basically, it's how to use robots to use existing openings like your mouth and stuff to access the lungs. And they're even working on clinical trials where they could get rid of something in the lungs with external waves being sent through the body. And that is the next step of this clinical trial. So, we all thought maybe, it was a tough thing to grab for, but it sounds like it's not. It's already occurring. And Michael Pritchard at First Health is leading the way. So I thought that was really interesting, that it's a reality. It's not a pipe dream, and I thought I'd share that. Secondly, I participated in the TARPO meeting, and we formed a great relationship with Brandon with the state, and he's no longer going to be heading our district. So I'm going to miss him. I asked him if I could call him on occasion. He said he's still around. He's moved. So we're just going to have to create a new relationship with the new person that heads our district now. Do you know who that is, Jeff, by the way?
I have not heard.
Yeah, I should know that, but it's just real important. I'm going to reach out to that person and try to get him caught up with all the things that we talked to Brandon about, and just try to be that liaison and because we had such a great relationship with him. Like I said, I asked him if I could call him if I needed to, and he said yes. He's not leaving us high and dry. He's just, moving on to another area. So, and that completes my report.
Kevin, thanks very much. I'd like to move on to agenda item number 3, which would be a motion to approve the consent agenda. And at this point, I'd like to know, though, if there are any issues in the consent agenda that would require that item to be spoken about directly, in which case we'll pull that out. Any council member have any issues or items for further review in the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on then. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda today?
I moved to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
That's a motion by Kevin Drum. Is there a second, please?
Second?
A second by Judy Davis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion is approved and the consent agenda is approved. Agenda item number 4 gets us into our main topics of the regular meeting tonight. This is a discussion and consideration of contracts with the ETC Institute for Resident and Business Surveys. And Jeff how do you want to handle that tonight? I'm sure Lauren, whose face has just appeared on the screen, is ready to go. But Jeff, any introduction?
Yeah, I guess just briefly, John, this is, obviously we do these surveys every year, but we redo the contracts every 3 years. And the reason we bring these to you for your approval is the fact that the 3-year aggregate cost for the community survey is over my contracting approval authority. We thought, given the fact that we have to bring that one to you anyway, we should bring both of them to you at the same time. And so I'll pass it to Lauren.
Sure, thanks, Jeff. Council, I'm here for you to consider the 2 contracts for ETC Institute for the resident and business surveys. We have contracted since 2012 for conducting resident and business surveys. And each year, as you all know, these surveys provide us actionable information that ties right into our strategic planning process here at the village. They are conducted in the July and August timeframe and feed right into all of the data gathering and results that we collect for the pre-retreat meeting that occurs in November. Our current contract with ETC has expired, and so we're coming forth today to recommend that we enter into another contract with them for a 3-year period. We have been very pleased with the services that they've provided here for us. They've provided their results in a timely manner at the agreed upon price, and they've been responsive to staff on any requests that we've had the whole time that we've worked with them. So very pleased with their services. This year, the contracts are a little bit different, specifically on the resident survey in 2 areas. One is the benchmarking analysis. We've asked for them to expand on their benchmarking analysis a little bit based on our feedback that we received from the Baldrige examiners when they were here for our site visit. That was the feedback specific to our use of averages with benchmarks rather than highest quartile or highest decile performers. And so what we've asked is for them to provide us the highest performer for specific questions, so we can see how we perform relative to the highest performer. Also, we've determined to not have them come on site for a presentation. We do have that capability here with my role that we did not have in the last time we entered into a contract with ETC. And we feel like the presentation, we can customize it to be a little bit more meaningful for the village, especially because as we've advanced over the years, as we have matured as an organization, we are able to not look at just the report at face value. We're able to dig into it a little bit deeper, pull out historical data and information that is also relevant for consideration when looking at the results. So those are the 2 proposed changes to the contracts. And again, you have the contracts in your agenda packet. They have locked in that price for the 3-year period. They will not raise the price over those 3 years. And I think you have a motion in your packet to consider tonight if you don't have any questions.
Lauren, first of all, thank you for answering some questions that did come up from some council members over the last few days. ETC has done a wonderful job for us. I remember when this started some years ago, and I think they've been an excellent resource. I do have 2 questions, though, at this point. First of all, do we actually own the data that goes back through the years? Do we have that data? So in other words, if something happened to ETC and it went out of business on the one hand, or they're in the cloud or whatever, where they store all this information, do we have ready access to that ourselves at any time we want without having to go through some other requirements through them?
Absolutely, we do. We request the raw data, so they not only provide us the pretty report, but they also send us a raw data Excel file that has all of the data and information included in that. That's actually what we take in-house and then turn into a pivot table and really dive a little bit deeper into the demographics and break that down. So we absolutely have all of the historical data.
Okay. And the second question is this. I'm sure you get, I imagine there are competitors to ETC that we would have looked at a few years ago and that probably are in touch with village staff such as yourself. we haven't considered any competitor, and I'm not recommending necessarily that we do, but are there other companies out there that do that? Again, if something were to happen to ETC, would we be able to replicate what we're trying to achieve here through another source, to the best of your knowledge?
Absolutely. I'd say there's probably 2 others that are top competitors with them, but when we go out and look at our benchmark communities, we're able to see who provides their surveys. And I would say there's probably 1 or 2 strong others that other municipalities use if they're not already using ETC. We like ETC because of the historical data that we're able to have with them, especially the fact that the way that they administer their survey year over year is consistent. If we switch to some of the others, the way that those surveys are set up, the questions are a little bit different. Some of them tend to be more on a 4-point scale rather than a 5-point scale. And we've been satisfied with how ETC has provided the services for us. But there are absolutely other organizations out there that could administer this should something happen in the future.
Thank you for those helpful answers. Are there other questions from council members to Lauren at this point?
I was just going to say, Lauren, we're limited too by those companies that have the benchmarking data of competitors, aren't we?
Sure, they probably have a benchmarking group, just like ETC does. It's based on their clients and their base of clients that they have. So I think it would depend. We'd have to look into that to see, what other organizations have that same kind of benchmarking data, and if so, how much of that data and information do they have?
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from council members? Judy?
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on your comment about this shifting from averages to the highest performer in the benchmarking. So is that like a single municipality, or are we looking at a gamut of players but at different levels?
It would be a single municipality. So who is the highest performer of that? Well, and I say that there could be multiple that set the highest mark. So we'll have to determine with them how we look at that point.
Okay.
But they have all of that data and information, and even in our contract, there's a paragraph specific to the right to use the data, and so that's the benefit for us to participate with them, as well as receiving our information for them to use for benchmarking purposes as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other comments from Jane or Lydia or other council?
I
Okay.
just have one
Jane?
follow-up to Judy's question. It sounds as though the highest performer could be a different municipality for each of the questions. Is that right?
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah.
But that highest performer would be communities of about our size. I mean, or could it be any community in the survey?
We can give them that parameter. So we
Okay.
will work with Jason Morato on the details of that. He said he'd be happy to customize that however we need to.
I'm sorry that I have additional questions, but I'm curious. One, when you asked him this, did he have other clients that asked for this? He's never had a client
It
ask.
sounded like a pretty new request for him. So again, he was happy to work with us and
Right, because
dive into it a little deeper, but I think it was a new request for him.
so that's the question I had. Then the second question is, just choosing the top performer and not choosing the top 3 and using a mean, I think that would be a much more, if you deal with numbers and you know that, sometimes there's anomalies. To eliminate the anomaly, you should average the 3 top performers, in my opinion, and not just the 1 top performer. But I guess you're going to come to that conclusion on your own. I'm worried about anomalies.
Can I add something real quickly?
Natalie, go
Yes.
ahead.
Yeah, if you can hear me. I would say that the Baldrige Examiner feedback was coming from a place of their experience with probably more for-profit businesses, healthcare, for example, And those applicants typically compare their performance to top decile performance. So instead of comparing ourselves to ETC average, we would compare ourselves to the top 10%, say, of performers. So what were those ratings? And so you'll see, if you look at a lot of applications, that's what you would see, comparisons to top decile. But then we've in the past, Lauren, have done this too. We've gone and said, okay, who is the top performer in an area that we're trying to improve? And then we
Right.
pick up the phone and call that municipality and say, okay, what is it that you're doing, that's generating these great results, and how can we learn from you and replicate your best practices? So it's kind of, I think, a combination of both.
Well,
Yeah.
if it's 10%, it's aggregated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not a single municipality, it's already aggregated.
And I would say, like Natalie said, this will help expand our benchmarking analysis that we do specific to the survey questions report that we receive. But as you all know, when you receive the data that we give you in November, we benchmark against specific municipalities that we consider high-performing organizations based on whether they're past Baldrige winners or other, southeastern resort towns, that sort of thing, that we benchmark against for other reasons as well. So it is not the only way that we benchmark.
And certainly we'll learn how this works,
Right.
and we can always flex one way or the other based upon what we think of the outcomes.
Exactly.
What you said, though, it sounds like we're already benchmarking about who we think the leaders are. We aren't? No.
In some cases, yes, but in general, no.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think you've addressed this a little bit, Lauren, and maybe some of the council will, over the next 30 days or so, have some thoughts about the orientation of this year's surveys. Are there some particular, new questions or different ways to ask things that may have started to arise from our planning and other events? Special new, kind of a new way, new issues to identify and talk about, get feedback?
Sure. If you have any ideas or any suggestions for that, feel free to email them over to me. Like I said, I'm collecting those as the year goes on. We've heard a few comments that came up during retreats, other comments that have come up just within internal staff meetings as well, that we've said, oh, we need to jot that down and consider it for potential changes to next year's surveys. And so I keep a running list of what those are throughout the year, and I'll be meeting with the managers on that in May. So if you have any ideas between now and that time, feel free to email them over to me. I'm happy to take suggestions.
Okay. Other questions, council? If not, I believe we have a motion to approve the expenditures for the 3-year contract. Would somebody please make that motion?
I move to approve and authorize the village manager to execute 2 3-year contracts with ETC Institute of Olathe, Kansas, for our resident and business surveys in the amount of $73,500.
That motion is by Judy Davis. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion by Judy Davis, second by Jane Hogeman. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you all very much. Move on into agenda item number 5, fiscal year 2022 strategic operating plan preview. This is our first view of the next fiscal year. Jeff, we look forward to your comments.
All right, thank you, John. And this is intended to be a preview. Obviously, we've been at this planning effort for, I guess, about 6 months now. We've gotten a lot of input and a lot of thoughtful effort has gone into this from council and staff. Over the last month or two, senior staff and departments have been crunching the numbers and trying to make it all work. And this is our opportunity to show you where we are, and you should think about this as kind of a really high level azimuth check to make sure that we're headed in the right direction on this before we go into the full scale development of the SOP document. So what we're going to talk about is the 5-year plan, and maybe more specifically, how we've taken those opportunities for improvement and innovation that have been identified over the last 6 months and incorporated those opportunities into into this plan the best way that we could find to make that happen. Taking it back to coming out of the retreat that happened last December, you as a council identified 3 areas of focus. And these areas of focus are woven throughout the plan in a lot of different ways. But I just want to remind everybody that those 3 areas were managing the development to protect our character, supporting the business community, and providing a safe and effective multimodal transportation system for our community. And so we're going to talk a little bit about those opportunities for improvement and innovation. Having a little trouble with my mouse here for some reason. And just to give everybody some framework or terminology about how we organize ourselves for getting things done in our plan. When we identify opportunities for improvement and innovation, we think about where we are with respect to knowing whether or not we definitely want to pursue taking action on those opportunities, or do we need to study those things? And if we don't need to study them, if they're relatively simple, they're short in duration, they don't require effort from multiple staff sections or departments, we might call that a project. And if they're more complex, they have a longer time horizon, or they have significant effort required from multiple staff departments, and we might typically call those things initiative action plans. So when you see evaluations, projects, and initiative action plans, that's what we're talking about. And then with regard to evaluations, we have a couple of formal processes, the BIRDIES and the ACEs that the framework we've used for many years now. And in some cases, the evaluations are even more simple than that. They're just little, we don't necessarily categorize them in any formal way. We just say we need to look at that, but recognize that we do need to do the evaluation. And so here are the 6 initiative action plans that are incorporated into this plan. And I'll start at the top. Under strategic objective, manage development to protect village character, or village character, we have 2 initiative action plans. The first is updating the Pinehurst Development Ordinance, and the second one is a small area plan for Village Place, Rattlesnake Trail, and Highway 5 South, the Highway 5 South commercial area. And obviously that planning effort is underway now, and it will continue on into the summer months and early fall before that's wrapped up, and then we'll be going through some implementation after that. With regard to the what we would call maybe the more comprehensive update to Pinehurst Development Ordinance, we have $200,000 allocated in FY22 for a contracted effort to focus on the more cross-cutting issues that we need to address throughout our development ordinance. Then moving down to the strategic objective of supporting the business community, we have a pretty significant project in this plan, that being expansion of downtown parking facilities. And what we envision is some design work in FY22 for some sort of a new parking structure. Think along the lines of the old carriage house design that was contemplated to go in behind the Holly Inn. And then you see some monetary numbers in there for the out years. And you don't see a big chunk of change there. And the reason is we would anticipate doing this with a debt service or by issuing debt. And we think that such a structure might cost on the order of $3.5 million. At least that's what's in this plan. And so what you see in there for FY23, 4, 5, and 6 are the debt service payments associated with dealing with the issued debt for that project. Under providing a safe and effective multimodal transportation system, we have the opportunity to develop our consolidated multimodal transportation plan. We had a lot of conversation about this at the retreat and afterward. And we recognize that the need to get that all together in one document, and we have that plan for FY23. And then under managing stormwater systems, You know, there's really more to this, I think, than really what's shown on this slide, but we do have the comprehensive stormwater master plan development in FY '22. You'll see later on that there's significant funding tied to our continued efforts to address our ongoing stormwater challenges across the village as well. And some of that will be tied to the results of this plan. And then finally, under providing cultural services and events, that big thing we've been talking about over the last several months, the expansion and enhancement of library services. And you can see there some pretty significant funding in FY '22. That's a recognition of the likelihood that we're going to make some initial investment and improvements to the facilities there, as well as taking on the operating expenses for the existing library and Tufts Archives about mid-year. And then starting in '23, doing that ongoing operations, as well as working on our design work for expansion of that facility. And then with construction taking place in FY '25 of a new library facility, I'll talk about that in more detail later on. But we see that potentially being funded by a combination of some capital fundraising, taking advantage of the library board's offer to try to assist us in that effort, as well as some money coming directly out of fund balance, and then augmented with another issuance of debt to get us over the top.
Hey, before you leave this slide.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand expand downtown parking facilities, but our discussion on parking was that the resort has a parking problem. We want to work with them to solve it. I feel like this is the second step, not the first step, but I just thought it was important for me to verbalize that. But I know that this is what we can control. That's why it's in here. You know, I see this possibly going differently, a partnership with the resort to build a parking facility that takes the pressure off the parking downtown. So I just wanted to verbalize it.
I think that what we've learned from the resort is they're very interested in trying to deal with the parking around the Carolina Inn. We've got some details about that from them. And I think that, there's certainly nothing set in stone, but it seems to me that the framework that it's been discussed with the resort is they would deal with that, and we partnering with them, because they would have to allow such a facility, for example, to go in behind Holly Inn on their property. But we would make the investment downtown. The other part of this, and why we have it early in the plan, is that we expect that if we're going to make that significant improvement to the library and archives facility, that we would expect to drive more library traffic downtown. We're going to have to accommodate more parking. And we know that we just can't get there with regard to getting the library expansion project done and open before the open. So we made the decision to start that immediately after the open. We do have the opportunity, however, to get this project done before the open. And so that's why we front loaded it, to have it ready for that library project, and because we had the opportunity. And it fits in the plan.
Yeah, well, I see it differently, and I just, I see a possibility of us working with the resort, and part of that parking being public and 75% of it being Carolina parking. So I could see this going differently.
Well, I think this is a preliminary plan. We need to get into the specifics about the location of the parking, because it may or may not really work out that it's, it could be more village centric, depending upon the location that we're talking about.
It could be, yeah.
As long as we're open, I'm fine.
Yeah, I think you're making good observations, and we have to get through the design phase before we can answer a lot of those questions. I think to Judy's point, we need to understand what the best potential solution is in terms of location and facility type, and then that may or may not open the door for ongoing discussions with Resort or other partners that might be able to help us pull it off.
Jeff, may I ask you to present this in show mode so that we increase the size of the chart?
Yeah, I can, and I certainly don't mind. I intentionally didn't because the pictures our pictures wind up covering up information.
Not, well, if we do speaker side gallery view, everything stays intact.
I'm sorry?
If you check view for side-by-side gallery, it remains intact.
Yeah, I'm not sure yeah, I'm just going to minimize to the point that I can. If this works for everybody, I'll go into presentation mode.
It's easier to see, I think.
How's that? Everybody happy with that?
I'm
Yes.
seeing it fine, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so I'm going to move on to the next slide.
Hey, Jeff, I have one quick question. The multimodal transportation plan, the $100,000, what exactly is that a deliverable? What does that $100,000 get us?
So we've got an existing bike ped plan that we recognize based on its age that needs to be updated. And this would be an opportunity to make it more comprehensive and think about golf carts and how those different modes interact with our vehicle traffic situation. And so this would be a contracted effort. We bring in experts, coached and guided by our planning department and our transportation planner to try to wrap our arms around that the world of transportation in Pinehurst.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would articulate it as, we've been talking about it for a while since I've been on council, is rather than looking in each of these things as individual transportation issues, look at them holistically and how they tie together. Something that hasn't been fully done. And
Yeah, it's a concept I know we've been discussing. I just didn't know how it all came together into what. So now I'm hearing more that we get somebody, we retain somebody who will pull it all together in one document.
That's right.
Jeff,
Perfect.
related to this subject, I was going to actually raise it after you finished your presentation. So when you have, I'd like to come back to this first slide with the IAPs and the strategic plan, because I have a transportation concept in my mind, maybe very similar to what Lydia and or Kevin or other council members have, to see how it might work into the plan. But please go ahead and finish off, and we'll come back.
You want to talk about it now, John?
No, I'd like to hear the rest of it. I mean, I've reviewed it all on paper, but go
Okay.
ahead, and then we'll
All
come
right.
back. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on from initiative action plans, we have a whole bunch of projects in this plan, but we pulled out some things that are maybe of most interest to the council and the community that are in this plan and provided them for you here. You can see, the ongoing effort. This was put on hold for a few years because we said we wanted to see what the results of the comprehensive plan were, but this plan does contemplate moving ahead again with construction of pedestrian facilities somewhere, annually, about $400,000 a year are in this plan for construction of pedestrian facilities. I think the way it's shaping up right now is we plan for FY22 to start moving forward on pedestrian facilities down around the lake. And we'll move forward from there, but I don't know that we have any more clarity in the out years beyond that. I mentioned before that there's a lot of money in this plan for stormwater improvements. You can see there over the 5 years, almost $2 million dedicated to stormwater improvements. And that will be facilitated by the master plan that we do. In the retreat, we talked to you about the possibility of putting a ladder truck in the plan, and I cautioned you at that time that the trouble with the ladder truck is that we're trying to solve a very specific problem, and while the particular piece of equipment is expensive, that's not really the real challenge. It's the manning. It's the staffing of a ladder truck that if we're really going to do it and not just park it somewhere. In order to create the capability, we would have to hire another 9 people. You know, so that's pretty significant operating expense to solve kind of a niche problem in the village of Pinehurst that we're already, you know, relying on the help of Southern Pines and Aberdeen to help us deal with. You know, what we found in our research through this spring was that there's an apparatus called a Quint, which is kind of it's a Swiss Army knife of fire apparatus. It can be a ladder truck and it can also be an engine, which means you can staff it with an existing engine crew. And then if you need to use it as a ladder truck, that crew can operate as a ladder truck.
Cool.
You have to also get another engine there to do it. But we think that this is the smart way to move forward. I still show it here as a ladder truck or a Quint, and it doesn't happen until 24. We got time to think about that. If it turns out that we need to go the direction of a ladder truck, there's going to be some considerably more staffing cost associated with this. Now, if we think about this in terms of, you know, the potential of eventually getting to a fire station 93 or that third fire station, you know, that we're going to have to man that as well. That's going to take some staffing. And so that might change our thought process depending on when we bring this thing on board. But so right now in FY24, we have $1.7 million dedicated for some type of an apparatus that will solve that problem for us.
And that's strictly the physical truck.
That's just, well, that's the truck and the equipment that goes with it.
Okay. Hardware. Got it.
Development of West Pinehurst Park. I mentioned in my opening comments today that the West Pinehurst Park master planning effort is underway. And in the plan, we have some initial funding to help to start to make that plan come to become a reality. It shows 23 through 26. Right now in the plan, actually what we're showing is $500,000 in 23 and $500,000 in 25 to make those initial infrastructure investments in 23 primarily, and maybe start to get to some other things in 2025. Again, we've had some feelers from some partner organizations out there that might want to help us, make this project happen. Of course, they aren't going to be interested in putting in infrastructure, but they might be interested in putting in a ball field or a soccer field or something like that. And so, we would see our initial efforts tied to getting the infrastructure into that location, so that we're setting the table for others to help us flesh out the entire plan. We have in the plan land for and design for a new public services complex, and this is tied to the ongoing small area plan effort for Village Place and Rattlesnake Trail. It's still not clear, how that's all going to come out, but we do anticipate the potential that we're going to be thinking about a different location for our public services operation to make that feasible. And so the plan allows for some design work and land acquisition in the coming years. You all know that we have money that you approved is a modification of this year's budget recently for land acquisition for Fire Station 93. We would see design work for that fire station being done in 26, the last year of this plan, with potential construction in the years beyond this plan. We have some park lighting projects, one in Wicker Park, one in Cannon Park in this plan. I think you all know that we have lighting at Cannon Park, but it's in need of replacement. And we would like to also put lighting at the ball field, soccer fields at Wicker Park. And we recognize that in terms of timing, when the temporary school comes out of there and we've got all that ripped up and the infrastructure, they've got all the electrical lines are run to good places. It's probably the right time to do that one, since we wanted to get it done in the future anyway. So we would envision doing that Wicker Park installation as the old temporary school facilities come out in FY '22, and then doing the Cannon Park lighting replacement in '25. Village Place streetscape enhancement in '22 and '23. This is tied to whatever the results are from the small area plan, and also our ongoing efforts to complete that project down Magnolia Road. This plan allocates in this next year $290,000 to construct a shared storage facility behind Fire Station 91. You may recall that over the past year we've been doing an evaluation on that. We recognized that we had storage stressors in many of our staff departments, primarily Parks and Recreation and Public Services and the Fire Department. We can deal with the public services in-house, but we recognize the opportunity to do a shared facility for Parks and Recreation and the Fire Department on the site of Fire Station 91. If you go back to the original design work that was done for that library, this building was in the plan. And as a cost-cutting effort, we recognized we didn't need it, right away when we built Fire Station 91, but it's there in the plan, and the idea is to go ahead and build it more or less in accordance with the way it was designed back there as part of that project. We also have in the plan to build out the unfinished upstairs wing and Village Hall, which will accommodate maybe just in the nick of time some of the additional staff growth pressures we have here at Village Hall, and that would be done in FY '22 as well. $271,000 allocated to that project. And then finally, the update to the comprehensive Parks and Recreation Master Plan for FY '22. Any questions on these before I move on?
Can you give us the amount for the Parks and Rec Master Plan, because that's covered up by the little picture of you?
Thanks, Jane. It's $45,000.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I was just wondering, I guess it doesn't make sense why that's not combined with the new West Pinehurst Park plan, but updating, but I guess they're totally different, but,
Yeah.
but we
It's
got
kind of like the difference between the comprehensive plan and the small area plan, I think. But they're kind of out of sync, aren't they? We're doing the focus one before the
yeah, it seems like,
plan.
yeah.
Hey, Jeff, I did a little work yesterday on the North Carolina Parks and Recreation Trust Fund. They give grants, matching grants up to $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
And the last time Pinehurst got one was 2003 with Wicker Park. The last one given in Ward County was 2012 in Aberdeen. So this is a park, if well done, if you had good public support, it could qualify for a $500,000 matching grant. Now, you only get it to match for the funds you spend that year. And if we're doing this in 2 stages, then we might not get it just for one stage or the other, but that's a
Right.
big help.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, and we'll be looking at that in starting in FY '23 as we're prepping for FY '23 when we contemplate starting that investment on West Pinehurst Park. Thank you.
Yeah, and I did that for 11 years, and so I'm happy to help any way I can.
Thank you. Okay, anything else?
That looks
Go
good.
ahead.
Okay. And then moving on to that third category, evaluations. We have 27 evaluations in this 5-year plan, which, including 1 birdie and 7 ACEs. The birdie is on document imaging. We recognize that across staff sections, we're still kind of living in the Stone Ages with, hard copy of everything in our filing systems, and it's taking a whole bunch of space. And we have a lot of like needs, and we're trying to figure out what is the most efficient way to get this done. It's going to not only facilitate getting it done, but also facilitate an ongoing system, if you will, for future years to make sure that we have accessible documents that are easy to find in a digital manner. So that's what that one's all about. I'm not sure if you want me to cover in detail all those ACEs, fire inspections process, automated employee timekeeping. This is one that's been on our watch list for a long time. We think that with this new person we're going to hire, and I'm not there yet, but this plan calls for an additional hire in the finance department. I think that's going to give us some capacity to try to get that, to finally get that underway this coming year. A couple of ACEs tied to solid waste. One, solid waste collection, and this is, do we need to consider insourcing of any of the various contracted solid waste collection efforts that we have out there with CCNC and Cotswold and Pine Wall? I think that what, where we are right now is CCNC is kind of difficult, a lot of moving pieces there, higher levels of service. Pine Wild, Pine Wild is kind of a one and done situation as well. It kind of fits our framework better, but it's hard for us to wrap our arms around that one in an insourced way, in an efficient way. Just given the way we're staffed and equipped right now, adding that to the plate would require considerable investment in more staff and equipment, and it just may not make sense right now. That's not a final answer, but we've been looking at this for quite some time. Maybe the more interesting one is Cotswold, and whether or not we can insource that. We think that we could probably do that with existing equipment and with the additional solid waste hire that's in this plan that I'm going to cover in a minute. But we don't have a final on that one either. But that's what that's all about. And we continue to wrestle with, in terms of efficiency in our solid waste operation, the return pickup challenge, and we're trying to figure out what's the best way to deal with that. Try to prevent the needs and maybe educate the public or some combination out there to try to minimize those return pickups. And so that's also an ACE for this year. We're looking at our purchasing and contracting processes. This is an efficiency effort. We recognize that we've got some redundancies and we don't do things all the same across all of our operations. And so we're going to take a look at that in FY23. And road patching services, again, we're going to look at that again in FY23. And then in FY24, we're going to be looking at recruitment and hiring processes. We're going to be looking at, I think, primarily there, we're going to be looking at alternative staffing models and how we can take advantage of them, not only to fill short-term requirements, things like internships, sponsorships, apprenticeships, maybe. There are different things out there, but also then use those as recruitment tools. You get people in here, you get them experience, get them comfortable with the organization, and you might wind up with a future full-time employee as well. So we're kind of excited about that, but we just don't have the capacity to get after it until FY24. Any questions on these before I move on?
On the document imaging, we're moving that way already in planning department?
Well, yes and no. I mean, we've got the automation effort that we just implemented in the planning department for automated plan submittal and stuff. That's facilitating the future, but we've got to catch up with all of the existing hard copy stuff. Yeah.
Present documents, the documents, I thought we were going to digitize them as well, but.
That's with regard to historical records. That's not where we are right now. But we want to think about this holistically, not just the planning department.
Okay. Great.
Yep. Okay.
Good.
Moving on to the 5-year financial plan. And again, this is really just high level stuff. So you're not going to see a lot of details here, but you're going to get a sense for where we're going. A little bit about tax rate. It might be helpful to remind everybody that in actually several years ago, given some, a couple of years ago, given some unique pressures that were being placed on our operating environment, we recognized a need to do some escalation in our plan on the tax rate. And it was an incremental thing, adding about half a penny per year over a period of years. And to refresh everybody's memory, that was, what was driving that at the time, and still is driving these pressures, were the state mandated incremental increases in our pension withholdings and the recycling problem, with the removal of glass and the increases in our tipping fees associated with recycling. Last year, when we presented the plan to you, we recognized that we could probably do away or do without that half penny increase last year. And I think you all wisely chose to do that, given the fact that there just was so much uncertainty with regard to the COVID situation and how it was going to impact our budget and our community, and the financial health of all of our residents and taxpayers. And so you took that half penny out of that plan. Now, last year's plan, it took it out of the FY21 tax rate. It left the future increases in the future years. So, if you look at this table in the middle of this slide, and you are looking at what was forecasted in last year's 5-year plan, you would see that in FY22 it called for 31 cents, and in FY23 it called for 31.5 cents, and in FY24 it called for 32 cents, and then it finally leveled off. And so, that was kind of a starting point for our analysis as a staff, was that we tried to figure out how to make all this work. And then we recognized that, when we wrapped our arms around the library project, both from the standpoint of the immediate operating costs associated with assuming responsibility for the library and Tufts Archives this coming year, and then also the expansion and increased operating expenses that would be associated with that. It looks to us right now like the initial operating expenses associated with this, taking over the current library operations, are going to add about a penny of pressure on our tax rate. And then in FY25 and beyond, really 26, when we start operating a new facility, it looks like probably about another penny. And so that was built into this plan. And so, when we did our initial analysis and ran the overall numbers, this chart said FY22, 32 cents. FY23, 32.5 cents, FY24, 33 cents, FY25, 33 cents, FY26, 34 cents. But as we continue to, kind of tighten our belt and find minor efficiencies in our 5-year plan, we recognize that we could go back and we could take that half penny out of the plan that you took out of FY21. And continue that throughout the plan. And so I think that was the good news. And so what you see here is our recommended plan for the future with regard to tax rates. I think it was Jane or Lydia asked, when's the next county revaluation? We think that's going to be in was the answer 25? I think it was 25.
I thought it was 25.
24. Could be effective in 24.
Effective in 25 was what I think I got from Wayne. We don't know what that's going to bring. We just have to recognize that as an unknown out there. And that's out there quite a ways in the future anyway. But so it might change in the future. It might change next year as we contemplate what the reality looks like then. But this is what's in the 5-year plan right now that we have in draft anyway. Any questions before I move on?
Jeff, one for me here. If I'm hearing you correctly, and I think I am, and I recall the previous tax rate plan that, as you said, was developed a couple of years ago, and we changed last year. What you're proposing here is still a tax rate below what that plan of 2-3 years ago had in it, correct?
No,
No, because, but it's, the only thing that's driving it higher
Yep,
is the library.
yeah.
It would be lower if it were not for the library.
Well, wait a minute.
I thought when you read off the different tax rates that were in the plan, say, even last year, before we reduced the tax rate for 1 year due to COVID, I thought those rates going out in 22, 23, 24 were a half penny or so higher than what we're seeing here. Not true?
What was in last year's plan was for 22, FY 22 was 31 cents, 23 was 31 and a half cents,
Okay,
24 was 32 cents.
okay, so it's a half cent more than
Yeah.
what we would have been thought before, and we understand the concept, the reasons for that. Okay, thank you.
That's right. Yep.
In 2026, it's a half penny below what we had on that schedule.
Yeah, that would be the only place.
26 wasn't on that schedule.
no, on that.
Wouldn't have been in the table, yeah.
2026 is lower than you had planned, I guess.
No, it was never planned for.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think what Kevin's referring to is that when we
just-
first ran our numbers on this 5-year plan, all of these numbers were a half penny higher.
Mhm.
But we recognized the opportunity to take a half penny out of every year.
okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. That's what John was
Is that what
referring.
you're talking about, Kevin? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what John was referring to.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah,
Yeah.
I understand, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for doing
Right.
that, Jeff. Thank you for doing that.
Jeff, I have one question, on the county mandated recycling and tipping fees. And I remember when David Lambert came in and he educated us on something the county was going to do to educate the public on recycling in an effort to reduce recycling fees. You're smiling. Did anything happen with that, do you know? And it had a catchy.
I'm going to throw a lifeline to Jeff Patton. Maybe he's got some updates on that.
I don't see Jeff Patton. But wasn't the presentation, the effort was to reduce recycling fees, correct? As I recall?
Well, yeah, it was an effort to, ultimately, yes. I mean, it was an effort to get us over the hump on a lot of contamination.
Yeah,
And just
yeah.
confusion that's leading to contamination across our
Yeah.
communities. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was finding commonality in rules and trying to have one set of rules. So one education would work for every municipality.
yeah. I remember the presentation barely, but I just was just looking for an update.
Yeah, I can give you a very, very brief update on that, if you can hear me, Lydia.
I can hear you, Jeff, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Kevin and Jeff are correct. It is a singular message to try to reduce confusion across the various communities. The county is applying for a grant through the state to fund this education campaign, and that's kind of where we're sitting right now. I'm not sure if David has made that application yet, or if it has been made and it is now sitting at the state for review. But that was the idea, is for matching funds to help get from the state to help pay for this education campaign.
And the hope was that it would then in turn reduce these recycling and tipping fees, correct?
Ultimately, if we were able to get contamination out of the recycling stream, then yes, it would reduce the tipping fee cost that is associated with recycling. The fees that we are paying are twofold. One, it is because of contamination, so we're having to pay fees to clean out the undesirable and unusable
Unrecyclable.
materials. And then the second component of that is the hauling capacity, hauling the material to the facility. That component obviously would still be there, but to the extent that we can get contamination out of the recycling stream, the better chance we have to lower our processing cost at the recycling facility.
Okay, and that effort is still underway, so we just wait and see.
Yes, I do believe, right now, I think David is, like I said, either has applied or will be applying to the state for a grant to fund this initiative.
Okay, all right, thanks.
All right, can I move on then?
Yes.
All right. So this is what it looks like in terms of overall numbers throughout the 5-year plan. You see across the top line, the tax rate, those are the numbers that I just showed you on the previous slide. You can see the full-time equivalents on line 2. I'll be talking about that on the next slide. FY22 has maybe the largest single year staffing increase that we may have ever seen in the village of Pinehurst. I can't say that with certainty, but it's pretty substantial. 10 new FTEs in FY22. And it's kind of amazing to me that we were able to make this work and actually lower, the residual taxes. I'll say the residual taxes, or the base taxes, tax rate, when you take out the impact of the library, even with these increases to the staff. I'm not going to dwell on all the details on this slide. You might have some questions about the other financing uses line there in the middle, $550,000 in 22 and $1.6 million in 25. That's tied to, when we do major capital projects, we'll be opening up capital project funds. And so in particular here, we'll be talking about in the future, one associated with a parking structure downtown and one associated with the library. And what you see is money flowing out of the general fund, $550,000 in 2022 to each of those capital projects funds so that it can be used to do the design work for that parking structure and for the future library expansion. And then in 25, there's another outflow to accommodate the building of or the expansion or whatever we wind up doing with that improvement of library services after the U.S. Open in 2024. We don't capture it anywhere else on this slide, but what's in this plan is $5 million for that future library project, which would be done in FY25. And we would see $2 million of that coming out of the general fund, and $1 million of that $2 million potentially being funded by a capital, a fundraising campaign, and then the other $1 million, coming out of our existing general fund, and then $3 million being financed through the issuance of debt for the project. As always, when we do this 5-year analysis, we're really keying in on those last 2 lines, the fund balance and the operating margin. And, we've had a lot of talk over the last several months about what our appropriate policy should be for fund balance. And, I think we're in keeping with that policy here. You see that with there's a lot of significant capital that's munching big chunks out of our fund balance over these 5 years. But the good news is even when all is said and done in FY25, we're still over that 30% threshold. And you see in 26, we're starting to rebound again, and maybe resetting for things like the future fire station and other projects that are in the future. And then with regard to operating margin, we like to be somewhere in between 89 and 92%. 91, 92%. If we're at 92, it's better to be in the out years than in this year, this most recent budget year. And you can see we're generally where we want to be there as well. Where operating margin is actually better, if you want to call it that, in FY24, and that's due to we've got some significant capital work going on there that year, but that's a representation of the fact that we are maybe I don't want to use the wrong word here, but we're over investing in capital. We're doing more in investing in our future capital needs than than we need to stay healthy for that 1 year. But overall, this is a pretty good picture for 5 years, and we're very pleased with it. Do I have any questions on this one?
Yeah, Jeff, when are we going to start reflecting the capital, separating out the capital funds to the fund balance? Or wouldn't we start that in our planning process?
Yeah, we could. I mean, with regard to the decisions you guys made earlier this year, I mean, you'd see that in those future years as we start to, yeah.
I think that would help with misconceptions we're getting from like our legislative team.
Yeah.
Like we have.
Well, I don't think these numbers are problematic to them. I think they've been reacting to like, you know,
42%.
I think I recall last fall in one of the updates that Brooke gave about where we were at that, you know, particular snapshot in time. You know, we had a number that was probably quoted somewhere that we had a 60% fund balance. Well, it's not really an end year reality. It was a snapshot in time thing.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
Actually,
Even our public, let's not even talk about our legislative group. I mean,
Yeah.
it just would, it would let people understand, that we're not rolling in money. by any
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between just piling up cash and saving for specific future needs. And I think that's a
Right.
good
Yeah, but
worthwhile communication effort.
yeah, maybe it should be reflected in the future strategic operating plan.
Yeah.
And I'll chime in, Kevin, and mention that we will explain this in terms of the fund balance policy change. We will descriptively explain that in the SOP document. There is a section in there that speaks specifically to financial policies. So it will be incorporated there. And also for the first year that you will see the committed fund balance will be for the year-end closing of fiscal year 21. So the current year that we're in. We'll bring forth that resolution to you in June. And then we'll know, or in order for you to commit the funds, the number will be calculated after year end. So we have final audited numbers. So that's why it's a little hard to estimate that right now because we don't have those beginning numbers to start
Right.
with. But potentially for the future years, we may be able to take a look at that and see if we can better estimate where they will land to explain how it would impact the plan itself.
And it makes sense they're not included because they're not authorized yet to the end of the year.
Exactly. You haven't officially committed them yet as a council.
Right.
If they're included in a 5-year plan, there'd have to be an asterisk next to them because they would not be approved. They have to be approved, right?
Okay, it's projections. Yeah.
Right. And I will say too, if you look at this slide, this projected fund balance percentage, it is a percentage of total budget and it's the total fund balance. So this number is reflecting those all categories, not just unassigned or not just
Right.
committed. It's looking at all of your total fund balance that you have available.
They'll end up looking the same because some of that money would be taken out of capital. The capital.
It would be reported as of June 30th at a point in time as committed for future capital, right?
Okay. I'm excited that, I think that when we make this change, I think it will be a lot more understandable, our position.
Yeah, I think that's right, Kevin, and that, I remember we discussed all that a few months ago now when we were looking at this whole fund balance issue and the capital accounts. So we'll start, it's already April, so we'll start to see, as Brooke has just said, we'll start to see information on that pretty soon.
Yeah, especially with the tax increase. I feel like it's important for us to get that out there, this separation of capital and fund balance.
I think it's a realistic plan and it really reflects addressing the needs that our community has. So I think it's very thoughtful.
I agree. I agree.
Yes, so do I.
Okay. So,
I'll move on then.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay? Okay, and then I talked about pretty significant staffing changes in this, not only in the 5-year plan, but specifically this next year. A lot of pressures here. And this, we've been wrestling with a lot of pressures across our staff departments for a lot of years. And this is just one of those maybe, I don't know, it's a hump year, where it's all kind of coming to head. But this is what we worked out in the plan. And we believe that this gets us there, at least given what we know right now. of course, we should all be, always be maybe a little cautious when all of your staffing needs are projected for this year, and there's not a lot out there in the future. But this is where we are, like I said, given what we know right now. At the retreat, we've talked about the need to add a financial services position, and that's in this plan for 22. You'll see an asterisk there, and it's tied to bullet comment number 3 there. We would like to start moving out on a couple of these, like tomorrow, if it's okay with you. The first one being that financial services supervisor position, and the second one being the P&Z specialist, which is the third one down.
Agreed.
Maybe I should pause. Does anybody have any concern with us starting that, moving forward on those hiring processes?
Not at all.
And
Not,
I'd say if you
not for
find
me,
them, if they
Jeff,
can-
and you brought that to Judy's and my attention in another conversation a week or so ago, and I think this is a smart thing to get started for the planning department.
Good
And
deal,
I'd
thank
be-
you.
I'd be,
And if you find more people for planning, go for it.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, we'll be looking, and yeah, we'll do the analysis. I mean, we have space constraints to be concerned with, and we have budget impact constraints.
Sure.
So we're gonna have to bring it back to you one way or the other to lay it out for you and figure out what makes sense. But
but if you have somebody that could start May 1st, I'd say go ahead and extend an offer and get them on board.
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
We're all bullish about staffing.
thank you.
in those areas.
Total support.
There are 2 firefighters in this plan for 22 as well. I'd like to call your attention back to a year or 2 ago. I'm trying to recall, time's flying around here, but we did a birdie a while ago about trying to come to terms with improving our response times in our fire department. And one of the things that we've resolved to do was to try to make ourselves better able to staff at full shift strength on a more regular basis. And as a result of that birdie, I mean, what we decided to do was we tried to do it maybe a less expensive way up front at first, and that was by hiring 1 additional firefighter as a floater, and then relying on our reserve fire positions to fill in the rest of those holes. And what we found is we made a little bit of incremental improvement, but it wasn't what we were looking for. And so we knew we wanted to come back and evaluate that and how well it worked. And we're at the point now where we've kind of decided it didn't work particularly well. And so that's why we have these additional 2 firefighters in the plan to fill out. So now we have a dedicated, we added to the previous one, you've got a dedicated person per shift to help fill out those staffing needs. We've been wrestling with challenges in the planning and inspections department for quite some time. We've been talking about these 2 positions were identified in the retreat. We recognized in the retreat that we needed either a half or a full-time position for a planning and zoning specialist, and either a half or a full-time position as a code technician, or maybe some combination, maybe a person that could do both. When it all settled out, our recommendation is to add a combined total of 1.5 FTEs there, 1 for the planning and zoning specialist and 1 for the code technician. There's a little finesse in this as well. And we've talked about whether it would be appropriate or we need to hire more planners as well. And, there's a lot of good thoughts on that. Historical perspective, about 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, there was a time we only had 1 planner, and then we got, well, actually, I guess we were supposed to have 2, Then we hired another planner, and we've got our combination planner and traffic engineer, transportation planner on board now as well. Now, as it turns out, we've got another hole to fill, and Seems like you take one step forward and two steps back on this sometimes. I think part of what we're thinking on this is that it might be helpful to get off that treadmill. You know,
Absolutely.
we are wrestling with a very difficult job market out there with that skill set. Highly trained, highly educated planner. And a question that we asked ourselves this spring are there a lot of things that we have planners doing now that we don't really necessarily need somebody with that specialized education to do? Things that are repetitive, things that it really just requires a smart person to understand what our ordinance says and apply rules and elevate things that they recognize are outside those rules, you know, and so I think that's some of the thinking about where we landed on this, and thinking that, you know, if we took a person like Jamie, you know, unfortunately we're losing Jamie, but you know, if you had two Jamies, I mean, she was doing a lot of things that really, I think a lot of other organizations had a planner probably doing. And she was doing it very well. But the point is, she's a capable person that can learn. And there are lots of people out there that are very capable and can learn. And I think that's, you know, and they are in that same market where there's just not enough of them to go around. And that's why we prioritized toward these two positions. John and Judy suggested to me in a conversation a week or so ago that, you know, okay, great, you know, while we're out here looking for a replacement for Peter, maybe, you know, if it turns out we uncover two really high quality candidates, maybe we should be open to hiring two. And I think that's a good thought. Again, we got to go back and check that against the reality of office space and budget impacts and come back to you with that. But I think it makes sense to look. We'll see what's available. But this is what's in the plan, in this plan right now for the planning department is those 1.5 positions. We have moving on there then, the solid waste. We have a floater position in solid waste. So this is kind of akin to what I just talked you through with the fire department. What we found as we've analyzed our staffing performance, if you will, over time, is that we're dealing with shortages in the solid waste field on a daily basis. And we have attempted to fill those holes in the past by, you know, hopefully we have enough CDL qualified people on streets and grounds that want to have the opportunity to float up to solid waste on a hit and miss basis to fill those holes. And, you know, in some cases it works very well, and in other times it doesn't work very well at all. But we think that we can do much better if we just add this floater position to fill those holes. And we think this is also part of that solution. And so once we've made this decision, and we're thinking about potentially insourcing a place like Cotswold, this additional floater position makes that much more doable as well. And so that's in the plan. You see about 4.5 FTEs in this plan for assumption of responsibility for the library and the archives. That's a placeholder. We're going to have to do some analysis in the coming months. That's roughly on par with what's staffing those two functions right now within that organization. So you have that in the plan. So that's FY22, that's plus 10. I think I mentioned that before. And even when you strip out the library and archives, that's plus 5.5. I don't know, I mean, certainly not in my experience. I don't think we've added 5.5 people in 1 year. And I can go back to my earlier comment. It's really kind of amazing we were able to do it and keep our taxes under control. I'm very, very pleased with that. I was kind of sweating it last December. So, and then in the out years, you see a slide back there in our inspectors. I I don't know if all you recall, but there was we had some previous conversations about one of our senior inspectors potentially retiring in the future. And this may or may not fit that timeline, but Scott has indicated that he may, when he makes that decision, have a desire to keep working part-time for us. And, we'll see what it looks like. It could be that by 25, the development pace and demand out there isn't what it is today. And if so, then there might be an opportunity to take this step back, but this is just kind of a placeholder for that potential. And then in FY 26, you see us adding potentially another 2 positions to the library. And again, that's a best guess right now. We're going to have to do some analysis on that. Any questions on this?
Jeff, I just want to comment, back in December, when you gave us on slide 40, the potential increase in FTEs, and I went back and looked, and we've been projecting flat at 146, 147 out for the next 5 years. And the list you gave us was so daunting.
Yeah.
But it says to me that this is not an overnight decision. You guys have worked at this and worked with this and worked with this. And so it's a decision that you spend a lot of time on. But also it's remarkable, like you just said, that we're keeping the tax rate where we are, adding 10 full-time FTEs next year. I don't know how you did it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's amazing to me that, this is kind of the big hump like this. In my thought process, and I've shared this with some people in the past, but it's kind of an aha moment for some people, I think. But if we're doing things right and our staffing needs are truly demand-driven, in other words, they're keeping paces with the requirements of a growing community, and I'm not making a comment on, growing community being positive or negative, but if it's keeping pace with the needs of the size of the community, then the size of the community should pay for this additional staff. And so if we're doing it right, at least, more or less year over year, we shouldn't have to change our tax rate to grow the staff to meet the needs of our community. Because a bigger community brings in more taxes, brings in more revenue. So it should pay for itself.
Yeah.
And I'm happy that, not only over the long haul did that happen in this plan, but even in this 1 year big hump, it's working out.
Yeah, and I wish the public could hear. I mean, you guys really work hard in doing this analysis on this slide of how many people are needed in each place. It's not, like I said, this is not an overnight decision, and you work hard to try to find not the right people, but the right skills for the positions needed. And, it should be appreciated.
Well, also at 33.5 cents, we're still probably the lowest municipalities tax rate, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, by far. Yeah.
By far. But is there one cost savings thing that you could explain, this magic trick you did?
What magic?
I think it's just the arithmetic of the increased taxes that you're bringing in and adding, this looks like a big tranche of new hires, but, you're also getting the revenue for them.
It might be a credit to efficiencies, too.
It's what it's all about. Yeah, I think
That's
so.
what I'm trying to say. I mean, I think you guys just do a remarkable job of trying to find efficiencies that give us this and the tax rate that's going to result.
Not to get esoteric, but the Baldrige process that gets us to create efficiencies, all of a sudden it's paid off.
Yeah, Jeff, I think this is very helpful. I mean, it's really more than just an outline. It really gives pretty clear direction with what we'll see in more detail shortly. I wanted to go, as I mentioned a while ago, I wanted to go back and look at, I think it's slide 6, but before we do that, you asked us at the end here, your last slide has to do with other discussion points, or are we sufficient?
If you'd like, I can wrap up and we can go back. So,
Yeah, well, my
these-
point going back is going to address that, I think, in a way,
Yeah.
with the idea that it's kind of crystallized in my mind over the last few days. So let's go back and just look at, I think it's slide 6, where you have the strategic objectives, right?
Why don't we finish up on your slide, Jeff? I think that's
This one?
You don't want to finish, Jeff, first?
Oops,
I think he's
didn't
finished,
mean
aren't
to,
you? Was there anything, did you have anything else, Steph? I thought we were led to your last slide, or do we?
Well, there's, just
Time-
questions, and this,
Go ahead.
maybe this is the jumping off point for your comment or question, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so with regard to the direction we would ask of you, have we sufficiently addressed your priorities that, you know, that we've been talking about over the last 6 months? Are there other priorities that we, you know, late-breaking things that we need to add that we haven't been talking about over the last 6 months? And, or are there other significant modifications you'd like to make to this proposed 5-year plan before we really start doing all the document development?
Right, right. It's that question that kind of stimulated an idea in my mind, but you've given the dates here for the next iterations of the budget and the 5-year plan. May 6th. So that'll be a
Right, so-
more detailed report on May 6th then, is that the idea?
What will happen on May 6th is we will deliver the hard copy of the SOP draft to you,
Right,
and that will facilitate my presentation of the 22 SOP at the council regular meeting on the 11th. And then you'll have a little over a week to contemplate the details of that plan after that presentation, in addition to what you had the week before. And then we'll get together for a budget work session on the 19th, and then if needed, also on the 21st. And I think we've already coordinated those dates and times with you to do that budget work session, to do any kind of the deep dive questions about what you see in the plan.
So Jeff, the only wild card that's maybe out there on the economic table is inflation. Lots of people are talking about opportunity for increased inflation. Certainly hearing strong growth in lots of industries around corporate America. And you've got 2.5% in your plan, I think I saw. And so, you know, it may not be the time to make a call on that other than what you have in here. It's definitely a what if scenario potential, you know, that may be prudent to look at. But also, from where we are right now, it's the best data we have, and
Yeah.
that's what a budget should be, incorporating the best data we have. But that's the only thing out there that I'd say we just have to, you know, keep aware that that's out there. No different than we didn't know what COVID was going to mean to us last year, you know?
Yeah, it's a great point. I guess I really wasn't aware of, you know, chatter about potentially more imminent increases to inflation until about a week or two ago. And I started hearing about it in the news, and I think that we do need to keep our eye on that. I don't think we want to overreact to it, because inflation has a tendency to go up and down. But not only that, but if you look at a lot of our funding sources, particularly the things that are they're generated off the sale of things, you know, our sales tax, you know, things that Powell bill funding, all of those funding sources, I mean, unless you talk about less stuff is actually being purchased, as things get more expensive, they also create more taxes.
Right, exactly. But I mean, the impact
kind of
will be in labor cost.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and it will certainly put pressures on our the wide range of our staffing costs. Again, on the revenue side, some of that's going to take care of itself. It's going to be offsetting. You know, yeah, the biggest source of our revenue is property taxes. I guess what I say about that is, and until we get to a revaluation and we don't contemplate that next round of CPI adjusted revenue neutral, that CPI adjusted is actually, it plays catch up. So when we get to that point, we catch up with all that inflation adjustment as well. So.
Will affect capital expenditures as well, but we are insulated pretty good on the revenue side, just not on the spending side.
Yeah, they offset, and that's what, I guess what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
yeah, the cost of business goes up, we also probably are gonna get more income, or revenue, so maybe not to the same degree, but it's not a one-for-one deal anyway.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. John?
So- Well,
You
yeah,
wanna go
no,
back to-
good, and we understand the calendar. So end of May, and if needed, we can go into June before final approvals by the end of June to meet the state's requirements.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, John. I mean, the whole idea behind these dates is it sets you up for a potential, or the opportunity to approve the 22 budget in the first meeting in June, and then there's a fallback. There's some flexibility built into this, that if you need to, you can do it during the second meeting in June, or even later, if it comes during a special meeting if we have to, but, yeah. So I'm gonna go back to slides, to
Well,
6.
It's a 6, yeah. Let's see here. Yep, yep. This is sort of crystallized in my mind over the last 48 hours, I suppose, looking at this and then thinking about your question at the end of the document here tonight, Jeff, on, priorities and things that are of interest to council. And it's a way that I've come to, I guess, in the last couple of days, as I said, about trying to do something with the T word, the transportation issue. And so if I look at the strategic objectives, manage development and protect the village character, support the business community, provide a safe and effective multimodal transportation system. Each of those in them has some element of transportation related, whether it's parking or just traffic or how we're going to handle the future. And the key issues that we've talked about tonight that are identified in the plan start to deal with some of these issues that the council's been talking about for a while. And it's things like parking in the core. It's the impact of the USGA, the parking at the resort due to Wicket Lodge. The small area plans are going to have impact on what we allow in these two areas. The whole multimodal transportation identified here, that gets into transportation-related issues throughout the village. And then we have the impact of the library, which you've mentioned again tonight. And that reminded me that, we're going to have a new school opening here this year in the fall. It's a much bigger capacity school than we had before, and it probably won't be filled on day one, but it will be over time. So the point I'm getting to is the whole issue of the transportation issue, which we've talked about quite at length over the last 12 months, and all these little elements that affect it. Again, whether it's the USGA, whether it's the library parking, the resort, the new school, Highway 5, all the things we're trying to do there. So it seemed to me that, I don't know that it's a new or an additional IAP. It may just be a tactic within the strategic objectives and the IAPs related to that. But we have our transportation planner now. And maybe we ought to be thinking right now, if you haven't already, about having that person in the planning department start to deal with all these issues that are swimming around that are going to affect traffic and transportation and the things we're trying to achieve as a village in many different areas. So that's the idea. It may be similar, I'm not sure, to what something that Kevin and Lydia mentioned earlier on, but this effort of the transportation planner to come to grips with this whole thing, I think does answer a lot of questions that are in the minds of the council and have been, for some time. So that's the concept, and I can explain it, just that way in brief. But it was a way of trying to begin to resolve the many transportation-related issues that we face, and to do so, pretty soon, because a lot of the things are going to impact that. If we don't start to deal with them, we'll get beyond us and we won't be able to resolve them. So that's my point, and how we could work that into this plan. But I think to some degree it's already built in maybe to some of the IAPs, or it would affect that. But again, the transportation planner is here, and maybe it's time for that. So that's my point.
I agree with your point, John. It's kind of like we have to be relentless on transportation, and it should never disappear from our horizon. Because the horizon's so far out with transportation. And, we talk about, we haven't really applied for and got grants that maybe we qualified for. So I think there is something to what John's saying. I don't know if it's for this page, but it's like a constant drumbeat of transportation issues. So I agree with your concept. I just don't know how to.
I think it's within some of these objectives already. I'm not sure, but Jeff may comment on that now, yeah.
Yeah, I've had a similar thought. I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're saying or not, but I think that we've got two things going on right here, now right here. One is that our transportation planner, at least for the immediate future, is going to be focused more on planning than transportation due to staffing challenges, Peter's departure. But I think that what's on my mind is how do we build the system of systems that transportation planner operates in that ensures that we're always touching the point, hitting those touch points that, and achieving the results that our community wants. And we don't have that yet. We're going to have to put a lot of good thought into that.
I mean, a simple way to start could be create a transportation matrix affiliated with each one of these IAPs. You know, what aspect of transportation is going to evolve from that or arise from that, like the small area plans. We have transportation specialists as part of that, of those particular activities. So what are some of the deliverables or outcomes that we could have from that? So that may be a way just to frame it so we all see it. And then, I mean, and one new person isn't going to take on world hunger on their first day,
Right.
much as we would like. So I think, then that way that to your point, you get this systemic approach that says, here's how we're concerned about transportation and everything we do, and how does it touch each of these areas? And what do we want out of that? And then, and then this $100,000 in 2023, that should be the deliverable that perhaps that you get out of that.
Yeah.
I think Judy's made a nice summary there, or at least an idea of how this could work. But all this occurred to me when in your questions here, Jeff, we talked about priorities and things we talk about and things we worry about a lot. And so much of that comes back to transportation issues and all these different ways I've tried to describe that. It seemed to me that maybe we need to take some baby steps, of course, first, but it seemed to me this was the time to begin that. I know that Mercedes will be doing other things in the planning department, but it might be helpful if we could at least get some transportation-related issues to be addressed there from all the impacts we're going to see, and we're going to see them sooner than later, as we know.
Yeah, I agree.
Might be as simple, to jump on Judy's point, is just a consolidated list, because there's going to be transportation solutions in the small area plan. Just one place where we could see it all together, not giving it almost just more of a encyclopedia. To Judy's point, we can't have one person overwhelmed by this. It has to do just how are we addressing transportation, or it's probably 200 little things instead of.
Yeah, I think that is the start point. I think it's more complicated than that, but I don't. If you think about all the things, we have systems of systems that allow us to do everything that the village staff does. And what we need to figure out is, in order to get the most out of our transportation planner, what are the touch points for that planner? And what are the expectations that we want to get out of our transportation planner when they do interact with those processes? We have to clearly define that and develop those systems. And I think it's going to take some thought and effort and time. I think we certainly have to get on top.
Okay.
John, back in December a year ago when the hot issue was traffic on Highway 5, and I remember at the time, the answer was, well, let's get our transportation planner on board and then we can address it globally. And then I thought, okay, we're going to hire this person, and how in the world do you identify the priorities for this person? But we were waiting for the day when we got this person on board so this person could address the transportation issues. How you do that, I don't know. I don't know. You know, Judy suggested the matrix, you know, how do you prioritize our work? But, you know, John, I'm glad you went back to this slide and we could talk about this.
Yeah, again, I think we all know we're wrestling with transportation issues. And, personally, I guess I would hate to see that even in a busy fiscal year coming up, 22, that we didn't start to address, at least in small steps, some of these issues that we really need to be planning for and assessing the impact from. And I know we have staffing to resolve in the planning department, and we've heard a lot about that tonight, and it's very important. But, yeah, I think I'd like to see the transportation planner get on that a little bit. But again, it's a thought that kind of came to mind over the last couple of days, just looking at this and thinking about other issues, as Jeff mentioned at the end of his report here, about what are other priorities and things that council's wanting to deal with. And in my mind, would be transportation would be a big part of that.
But jumping off the small area plans, you know, there are transportation planners, Rainey Kemp being part of that. And so we'll get some body of work from them that gives their perspective. There's nothing that would keep us from engaging them for some further work. We don't have to rely on this poor new person that, you know, is just bewildered by everything that we do here. So, I mean,
Right, I agree with you, Judy.
let's look where we can leverage talent and leverage information. And these guys are going to hopefully feed us something that will be informative and maybe pivotal. But, you know, at least give us a landscape from which to react and maybe build on.
I'm very open to that idea of
Okay.
Well, get their consultants. I like that.
Again, it just sort of came to my mind in the last couple of days. I'll spend some time talking with each of the council members and staff over the next week or so, and just work with Jeff to figure out what we can do and what we can't do. But it's an idea I thought deserves some attention. It's certainly in the minds of the public as well. I would recommend at this point that we ask any further questions we have with Jeff, but then try to close this discussion and move on. But this has been a very helpful presentation tonight, Jeff, and I know the council have done a lot of work looking at this, and we've learned a lot by listening tonight, too.
But very, very good plan and a very helpful presentation.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right.
All right, why don't we,
Thank you all.
thank you. Can't
Jeff.
wait for next step, phase 2. That would bring us to item number 6 on the regular meeting agenda, other business. I have no other business to bring to the council tonight, but some of the others may. Kevin, any other business you had in mind tonight to discuss in the regular meeting?
I just want you to know how many thank yous I got for the crosswalk on 5. And
Oh, yes.
but you talk about transportation and, you know, things we're doing. That was extremely noticed by everybody in the community I live on. Everybody's excited from Pine Wild to Shaw Road about that. That's just something that small can make such a big impact on transportation. It shows you that just little bites of the apple will really deliver to our public. Our public sees that as something huge, much bigger than it is. And I just think that, we're, you know, we got to keep on keeping on. And I think that's a good example of our previous discussion. Such positive feedback on this.
Yeah.
And people are stopping, which is the shocking thing. There was a question whether people would stop because, you know, they kind of were supposed to with the signage, but it is working. And that is probably the most, you know, amazing thing about the whole thing.
Yeah. I slow down every time I come north or south right there, just even if there's nobody around, just to kind of make the point, but it's wonderful.
That was a great job.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of unsolicited positive comments from
And just
Walker,
to be
our
clear-
community.
Be clear, we spent the money to be reimbursed later. Is that correct? Did I say that right?
Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we pay for that one out of pocket and won't be reimbursed for it.
Well, okay. Well, heck,
That is correct. That was our expense. We did the installation ourselves in-house. But,
And that saved us some money, right?
pardon?
That saved us a lot of money to do it in-house, right?
Yeah, obviously, definitely saved us some funds. Since I didn't bid it out, and it's the first ones we've done, I can't tell you what the value was that what we would have spent had we had a contractor do it, but we did use our own forces in-house to do it.
why would the state reimburse that at some point when they were working on a Highway 5 plan? Why doesn't that occur? Even if it wasn't fully reimbursed, because we want it done now, we might have paid more than they would have paid. I just don't understand why a partial
I
reimbursement.
think it wasn't actually in a plan yet, I think is probably
Yeah.
where they come down on it.
Yeah,
Okay,
We
I'm glad, it was well worth it. I'm glad you did it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
it looks good, it'll work. Moving on then, Judy, any other business to discuss tonight?
No, thank you.
Jane,
No, thank you.
Lydia, any other business?
Nothing, John, thanks.
Okay, we'll move on into comments from attendees. No one is here now, so unless there was anybody on the list, I don't think John Hoffman was here, but he left. I do have several emails from earlier today that the clerk has given me, and I had a time to scan through them just before the meeting, and I'll read a couple of them in a summarized form, which Kelly has provided to me, and I'm very
You
happy
sent
that she
them
would do
as
that.
well. We were sent them, John. I didn't know if you knew that.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You
Yeah.
did get those before the meeting started. Okay. And I would only say that we appreciate these 8 emails. If I have it correct, they all relate to the interest on the parts of citizens for sidewalks. Some are from families, some are from others. They're mainly in the Lake District, Burning Tree, St. Andrews, I believe. And they all talk about the benefits of walking and the desirability of safer roads in the village of Pinehurst. So I would urge you to read those if you haven't already. And this is referred over to the Bike and Ped Committee, and they already have been, I think some of these issues may be resolved in the next fiscal year and in this calendar year, perhaps. So I won't read each of these. We have them. We thank the persons who submitted them, and they will be looked at. That would then bring us to a motion to adjourn to get into the work session, which we have several key issues to discuss. Is there a motion to adjourn the regular meeting?
I move to adjourn the regular meeting.
I second that.
Motion by Judy Davis, second by Kevin Drum to adjourn the regular meeting. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous. We'll close the regular meeting, and shall we meet back here in no more than 10 minutes, please? Would that be all right?